You want a story, huh? All right, let me tell you one that'll make you question every neighbor you ever waved to, make you laugh a little, maybe grit your teeth a lot, and, if you're anything like me, leave you looking sideways at anybody who shows up uninvited with a clipboard. See, the trouble didn't creep up on me. It kicked in the door the exact minute I inherited the ranch. I'm talking about the kind of chaos that wears a blazer, drives a white SUV, and acts like she owns every blade of grass in Colorado. I hadn't been on my father's land for 10 minutes after his funeral, boots barely scraping the porch, when this SUV whips around the corner like she's late for an apocalypse. Out jumps Marilyn, holding a stack of HOA notices thick enough to stop a bullet. "Ethan Cole," she barked, all teeth and perfume. "Ridgeway HOA. You're in violation." I squinted at her, the cold slicing through my jacket. "I'm sorry," I said. "Didn't even get a chance to put my bags down, and you're already fining me?" My ranch, mind you, felt like it was breathing after a long, hard winter. And this woman wants to tell me it belongs to her? Her SUV hummed behind her, like it was waiting to pounce if I made a wrong move. She handed me the notice, her smile saying she'd never lost a fight in her life. "We claim authority over the entire visual perimeter, including this ranch. Fines begin today." I unfolded the paper, felt confusion twist into anger. "This property isn't part of your HOA." Her eyes never blinked. "We maintain harmony, Mr. Cole. Visual harmony." Lord help me, that's when I realized, HOA people don't blink. They just escalate. I might not know every county code, but I knew one thing for certain. I'd just inherited more than a patch of land. I'd inherited a war. Let me back up for a second. I grew up tracing every edge of this ranch with my father. Summers spent walking fence lines, him teaching me how boundaries mattered, not to keep people out, but to remind you what you're responsible for. I'd parrot his words back, never really grasping the weight. All I knew was, beside him, with the sun baking my neck and the grass scratching at my boots, I felt like the richest kid alive. He carried this little notebook everywhere, sketches of the land, fence repairs, weather notes, like a cowboy's version of a secret diary. "Memory fades," he'd say, tapping the cover. "Proof doesn't." One memory sticks out. Near the eastern fence, the hills dipping down and the grass up to my knees. He knelt by a busted post, pressed my hand to the splintered wood. "This ranch has been fought for, settled, defended. It's not just dirt. It's a promise." He fixed me with that blue-eyed stare of his, like lightning in a storm. "Never let anyone take what's ours." I repeated the words, not knowing that one day they'd be the only armor I had left. But when you're 18, the world feels bigger than broken fence posts. I left for college, chasing something that didn't smell like hay and diesel. My father never argued, just nodded, half proud, half heartbroken. Life moved on. Internships, city jobs, phone calls that got shorter and shorter. I told myself he was fine, that the quiet suited him. What I didn't know was that the battles never stopped. They just got quieter, meaner, sharper. At his funeral, neighbors talked in hushed tones, stories about how my father stood his ground. I thought they meant cattle rustlers or bad weather, but back at the house, sorting through his things, the truth started to bleed through. His office was like a time capsule, maps, old tools, everything in its place. But his notebook, the one he'd never let me touch, was waiting on the desk. Inside, the sketches gave way to angry scrawls, dates, complaints, references to them. The last note, trembling and barely legible. "Ethan, if you're reading this, the fight's reached you. Don't let them bury this land under their rules." I sat there, guilt dripping into my bones, realizing I hadn't just inherited dirt and debt. I'd inherited his unfinished war. The lines he taught me as a boy weren't about property, they were about identity. By the next morning, the ranch felt watched. Not haunted, just observed. Sipping coffee on the porch, I spotted 3 more notices, each taped to the fence with a smugness you could smell. Fence deterioration. Improper grass height. Unauthorized equipment. My father's old tractor, like it was a rusty crime scene. I tore the notices down, the tape snapping like little insults. This wasn't coincidence. It was an attack. So I drove straight to the Ridgeway clubhouse, where community meant imported lawns and glass walls. Marilyn sat behind the front desk, arranging papers into neat little stacks like she was organizing the universe. 3 violations in 2 days, I said, dropping the notices on the counter. "I haven't even unpacked." She slid one toward herself with a fingernail I'm pretty sure was sharper than her tongue. "Our standards apply regardless of your schedule." I stared at her and said, This isn't your community. This is private property. Her eyes flashed cold. Your father understood our authority, she murmured, and that's when something snapped. Respect isn't the word you're looking for, I shot back. And he sure as hell didn't agree with you. She started talking about visual harmony and discretionary oversight, as if the HOA had evolved into a private government. Show me in the law, I challenged. She smiled, knowing she'd rattled me. Some homeowners prefer cooperation. I hope you're not choosing confrontation. Everything in her tone begged for confrontation. I leaned in. You don't control my land. Not a square inch. Her face stiffened, just for a second. Then you leave me no choice but to escalate enforcement. Daily fines. Formal complaints. Property assessments. This can get very uncomfortable, Mr. Cole. I left, but not before noticing something strange. A framed aerial map behind her desk, showing the clubhouse stretching just a bit over the property line. My father's line. My heart thudded. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was something. 3 days later, the first county inspector showed up. I expected a delivery, maybe Henry swinging by. Instead, a man in a windbreaker stood at my gate, clipboard ready. Mr. Cole, we received a report. Possible septic leakage near your east pasture. I almost laughed. You been out here lately? The only thing leaking is sarcasm. He sighed. Complaint also mentioned improper waste disposal. Old machinery leaking contaminants. I walked him out, boots crunching over frozen grass. He took photos, checked everything. I'll file it as unfounded, he said. If I'm being honest, I've been out here before. Your father dealt with this kind of thing, too. Multiple false complaints, always anonymous. Usually after a neighbor got mad. He left me with the truth. This was a campaign, not a misunderstanding. Next came the social media hit job. Henry had insisted I join the town group online, just to keep an eye on things. That morning, my phone lit up, a photo of my ranch captioned, "This eyesore is dragging down our property values. New owner refuses to cooperate. Something needs to be done." Comments piled up like snowdrifts. Disgraceful. Fix it or move it. He's not one of us. A few folks tried to defend me, but they drowned in the outrage. In town, whispers followed me down grocery aisles. The man at the feed store muttered, "Hope you get things sorted." I'd been here less than a week, and already I was enemy number one. Frustrated, I tore through my father's office, looking for anything, a clue, a weapon, a lifeline. That's when I found the box. Letters, dozens. Years of HOA notices. Same tone as Marilyn, only more venom the farther back they went. But my father's replies that AT first, polite but firm, then shorter, sharper, angry notes scrawled in the margins. They think their rules override the law. Harassment. Pure harassment. The last batch, paperclip rusted, his handwriting shaky. One letter accused him of willful neglect. Another demanded he remove unsightly structures, meaning the barn my grandfather built by hand. My father's last reply was just 3 words. You have no authority. I stared at that, rage and sorrow mixing in my chest. At the bottom of the box, tucked away, one final note. They're building on borrowed time. It hit me then. This was never about visual harmony. This was about power. About someone somewhere, thinking they could outweight an old man until he was too tired to fight back. My father had fought this war alone. I wasn't about to do the same. So I went to see Henry Dawson, our nearest neighbor, a man whose boots had walked this valley since before Ridgeway was even an idea. His house smelled of wood smoke and black coffee. Figured you'd come by sooner or later, he said, pushing a stack of old maps across the table. Your father didn't back down. That ate at Marilyn. She don't like people telling her no. He rolled out the county survey, black boundary lines, my family's ranch on one side, the Ridgeway development on the other. But the clubhouse? It wasn't just close. It was over. A sliver, but still trespassing. You're sure? I asked. Henry snorted. Son, I was a surveyor for 40 years. I don't guess about lines. If the clubhouse was on our land, that changed everything. I needed a lawyer. Henry wrote down a name. Ava Merrick. Young, sharp, hates bullies. Your dad talked to her once, but didn't have the strength to follow through. I called Ava that night. She arrived the next morning, legal pad in hand, eyes like searchlights. We walked the border, checked the maps, and her verdict was swift. This is a clear encroachment, but we need county records. At the recorder's office, the clerk dug out a file, a lease agreement signed by my grandfather, granting the HOA 30 years to build their clubhouse. Expired 8 years ago, no renewal. Ava's eyes met mine. They've been operating on your land, for free, for 8 years. And they tried to scare your father into silence. Marilyn had told me my father respected their authority. She was lying. He respected the lease, nothing more. And when he didn't renew it, he understood his rights. The borrowed time wasn't poetic. It was legal. I walked into the next HOA meeting with a folder under my arm and a calm that surprised even me. Marilyn tried her best to maintain control, but her voice wavered. I laid the lease in the center of the table, read the clause. Upon expiration, all structures must be removed within 180 days unless a new lease is executed. The room exploded. Marilyn insisted there was an understanding, but the board started questioning her. Her mask cracked, and when she realized she was losing, she threatened me, right there in front of everyone. Problems have consequences, Mr. Cole. I leaned in, voice steady. You don't understand, Marilyn. This land is mine, and you've been trespassing. The board looked at her, not me, for answers. I'd flipped the script. When the county hearing came, it felt like walking into a coliseum. Residents packed the benches, Marilyn beside her attorney, certain she'd win. But the judge, an older woman with steel in her hair, cut through the nonsense. Ava handed her the expired lease. The inspector testified that all complaints had come from the HOA, that every violation was baseless. Henry, called as a witness, confirmed the boundaries. The judge turned to Marilyn. You have no legal claim. You trespassed, and you weaponized the system to punish a dying man and his son. Her gavel slammed, echoing like thunder. The HOA was barred from the property. All fines null and void. Marilyn stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. In that moment, I felt not just relief, but something my father would have called justice. Word spread through Ridgeway faster than wildfire. Social media exploded, not with anger at me, but at the people who'd let it go on. The board called an emergency meeting. Marilyn was ousted, voted out in front of a roomful of neighbors she'd once ruled. I watched from the back, arms crossed, feeling the kind of satisfaction that doesn't come from revenge, but from seeing truth finally land. A few days later, the new board called me in. A formal apology, a fair lease, boundaries set in writing, promises of transparency. I signed not out of mercy but because it was right. People in town started looking me in the eye again, some offering help, others telling stories about my father I'd never heard. Turns out, he'd fixed more fences for neighbors than he had for himself. One afternoon, walking the property line with Henry, I realized the lesson I'd missed all those years ago. Legacy isn't about winning or losing. It's about holding the line, quietly, stubbornly, especially when the world tries to blur it. Strength isn't loud. It's the refusal to bend when it matters most. Marilyn? She vanished, her kingdom of fear and fines collapsing behind her. The HOA rebuilt itself, with real rules, honest elections, actual community. The clubhouse opened, under a legal lease, and for once, nobody was afraid to speak up. The ranch, my ranch, felt different. Not just safe, but mine, truly mine. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk the boundary, hand resting on those old posts, feeling the wind and the silence, knowing my father would have been proud. Not because I fought the battle, but because I finished it. Because I learned the hardest truth of all. Some legacies aren't inherited, they're protected. So here's my question for you. Where do you draw the line? When does defending what's yours become the only choice left? Would you have stood your ground, or let the HOA take a piece of your story? Tell me, because justice, like land, only means something if you're willing to fight for it. Drop your thoughts below. Ever battled a bully with a badge? Ever had to defend what was rightfully yours? I want to hear your story.